and welcome to Property Question Time. I'm Stephen Galpin, and this is a show where you can have your property-related questions answered by our team of property experts. And joining me today is Jamie Pritchard of Glenhawk, specialist lenders to the property industry.
Hi there, how you doing, Stephen?
Very good, nice to see you back. And somebody who's making their first appearance on Property Question Time, Charlotte Edwards, property developer, landlord and coach. Welcome to you.
Thank you so much.
Good, nice to have you here. Do you have a good trip down?
Very good, thank you, yes.
Good, okay, well that's opened the door to the questioning, and we'll start off with you, Jamie. Has the current financial turmoil affected lenders' criteria in an adverse way, or is the industry fairly philosophical about rates and loan take-ups?
I don't think philosophy comes into it when it comes into finance and the markets.
I think you're probably right.
The short answer to sort of look at it is yes, there has been turmoil. It's been, with the increased rates, that was obviously increased risk. And what we're seeing is that obviously Savills have even changed their opinion. So in a month, so they were saying it was going to be quite level, the house prices next year. Now they're saying a 10% drop in house prices as well. So all those things point towards lenders have to change the criteria. You know, they've changed rates, but they've also changed the criteria. So is that limiting the LTVs across the board? In the last month or two, we've also seen Help to Buy disappear. So you've had to have captured one of the applications, I think 30th of October, I think was the date that you had to complete by March. So there's been some changes there for first-time buyers. So restriction on products, less products in the market as well, across the board, from your high street banks to your specialist lenders. And the other effect that interest rates going up has had on landlords, I'm sure that you've experienced it, Charlotte, is that stress tests have gone through the roof as well. So actually the stress test of how much you have to have compared to, for the ICR calculation it's called, which you need to do. So lots of change,
okay, well,
lots of turmoil.
Let me come back to you on a couple of those things. Stress tests, I mean, it was announced some time ago the stress tests were going, certainly for just normal residential purchases. Why is that?
We've been through this before, Stephen.
Well,
in this sense, the stress test you're referring to is the affordability for buying a house, as in to live in.
But why doesn't that apply across the board? Surely, you know, a stress test is necessary, whether you're a developer, a landlord, an occupant of a property. Surely,
so
it's only sensible lending.
Well, yeah, even though if like the Mortgage Market Review brought stress tests in for, say, affordability for a residential home that the viewers live in, but it doesn't mean that lenders take that on and just remove stress tests itself. Some of them will be stressing at 3% above where the pay rate of the product is at the moment. Some will be doing more. Some other specialist lenders don't stress at all. It is right to bake in future increases. The same way that buy-to-let, there's got a different type of stress. You're stressing against the rental amount and can you afford future fluctuations in an interest rate environment. Now, the Prudential Regulation Authority brought in those things, and I'm sure landlords like myself, you, Charlotte, experienced the pain of that from 2016 onwards. That has changed actually the ownership structure of how you buy a property potentially. So limited companies, this isn't tax advice for any of your viewers, but limited companies can potentially get a better stress test. It's all linked to the tax that you would be paying on potentially that property as well, on the profits that you make from that rental. So stress test is definitely here.
But Jamie, what I'm trying to get to, people like ourselves here, we see lots of people from all different sectors of the industry, okay? And we try and get an understanding of what's happening to the market, where it's going, where it's been, and what are the factors that are affecting it. And you're quite right to say that over this last month, for instance, Savills have changed their mind about what's going to happen. And I suppose with the kind of government sort of governance that we've got at the moment, you are going to get fluctuations of ideas, aren't you? Because things change almost week by week. But I just wonder, you're at the very heart of things, because you see the start of the process, don't you? If somebody can't borrow the money, then the market's going nowhere. Okay, so I just wonder, what are the things that are affecting us? I mean, I read in the papers this morning, I was discussing with Charlotte before we had the show, dropouts from new build has gone from 20 to 28% in a month. So people are worried about that. Developers are worried about that. A lot of the developers we talk to are saying, oh, well, I'm keeping my powder dry. I'm going to be a bit cautious over the next few months. But what do you think is going to be the critical factors that really affect the market? And do you think it's going to go down by this 10 or 15% that a lot of the agents are predicting?
My crystal ball's on the blink, but everything's pointing towards actually the property prices. So I won't sit on the fence. Property prices do look like they will be going down by 10%, but did they go up by about 10, 15% based on what Rishi did when he was Chancellor?
Yeah.
To bring in the stamp duty holiday. Yeah. So I don't think it's going to be a massive fall. I think the lenders, then we need to be aware that you can, from a bridging lender's point of view, that you can exit the loans that you actually get on as well. So we're looking at everything. I think from your question point of view is customers are looking for a little bit more certainty and not the volatility that's in the market. We've had quite a few of these shows that I've done, and it's changed so much, hasn't it? From a mini budget to before that, the base rate increases, and what swap rates are doing, what lenders actually, and how they're funded that way. So until we get a bit more certainty in the market where interest rates are going to be, exactly where first-time buyers, are they able to get on the market, what products are available, but based on the size of deposit they've got as well, all of those things, we're going to see a little bit of, like the question asked, a little bit of turmoil. But I don't think this is 2008. The banks are liquid. There's a lot of capital in the market to fund these deals.
That's a big difference from 2008, isn't it?
Yeah.
The banks are liquid.
The only thing to put really in comparison to 2008 is that we're going to be going into recession. And it's the recession word. Now, I don't think it's going to be as deep as that. I'm no economist, but I think, there's lenders who want to lend. There's landlords that do want to, still be landlords. And, in between 2008 and now, landlords have had an absolute kick in.
Yeah.
They've been almost treated as pariahs by being hit by taxation, different rules of affordability, how your portfolio gets looked at in the background, EPCs, HMO licensing, the list goes on with all things. But landlords are still needed in this country.
I'm getting depressed talking to you.
You can hire me up for me motivational speeches, but Charlotte, don't you agree?
Well,
there's lots of...
Charlotte,
changes,
you see many sides of the industry, from landlord, developing, house building. What do you think? Where do you think we're going?
I think the government are trying to push for a professional outfit as a landlord. So the push towards, limited companies. I think, they're trying to discourage the sort of accidental landlords of one or two properties. They want a professional outfit.
And do you think that's simply just for the efficiency of tax collection?
Well, it doesn't do them any harm, does it?
No.
But also, I think it improves standards within the lettings market. So...
I mean, another subject we've had on this programme many times, do you think that, some kind of landlord training by the local authorities that they fall under might be useful? I mean, I do. I think we're in such a litigious age and such an age where legislation interferes within the market that I think a lot of landlords don't actually know whether they're coming or going.
Well, in Wales, where I invest, so they have Rent Smart Wales. So landlords have to do a qualification there, online qualification, unless you use a letting agent who would also have that qualification.
Yeah.
So something similar perhaps is on its way in England.
I don't think that would be a bad thing. Cheer the lenders up too. Good solid lending.
Education across the market is key, isn't it? The same way that, developers, I can't do anything developing myself, but I've got a crack team around me. Same way that I can't give myself tax advice. If I wanted to be limited company or personal, I've got a tax advisor for that. So the education of when the market's right. Just on that one point though, I do think there is a problem that when it goes too professional, is there such a thing as too professional? But if landlords start to remove themselves from the market, the accidental landlords, the dinner party landlords, whatever we want to call them, we're going to see headlines in 3 years' time that saying that rents are going through the roof. And that is because the few are now owning the buy-to-let, are controlling the market, and the rents will go flying up.
That's a good point.
And the costs of running an organisation rise year by year, don't they? So it's all got to be recouped by rent. It's the same argument, isn't it? When people used to say, oh, developers have got plenty of money, so they can pay for these 106 agreements and all the rest of it. Well, what do you think the developer does? All he does, he says, I've got 50 flats, I'll divide that cost by 50, and,
sure.
and up goes the price.
Yeah, we just pass on the cost.
Okay, Charlotte, your first question then. There seems to be a reversal of all the recently suggested property industry legislation in terms of rentals. I suppose that means a cap, and development strategies. I suppose that refers to planning in a lot of ways. What would the experts like to see any new government regime bring in to keep the housing market from recession? Is there any one thing?
I think you know, a few of the things that they've brought in the past have fanned the flames of a property bubble, which we find ourselves in now. So what would I like to see? I think developers would like to see a steady property market, and I think that means that we need a price correction. So if they can bring in a measure to bring about a price correction, which, you know, we discussed before, I've read articles between, you know, 8% and 30%.
Yeah.
I think Halifax is saying 8%.
Yeah.
You know, and I think you said 10%. So let's agree it's going to be somewhere around there.
Nobody knows.
I think
That's basically it, isn't it? Nobody knows. I think they think there is going to be, and I hate the word correction, but there will be around 10%.
I don't like that word, because if you're saying correction, it means go back to a point, doesn't it?
No, that's why.
And where's the point?
Yeah, and who's to say we've been incorrect over the last few years because of what's happened in the market post the stamp duty and COVID?
The real fundamental problem is that if you've got a house, you know, let's have inflation, bring it on, you know, because I'm going to get richer by the day.
Great for homeowners, but what about people trying to get on the ladder? And that's what we need to correct.
That's the problem. But I think then my argument would sort of go to his cohorts and say, well, look, why don't we have more flexible mortgage facilities, lifetime mortgages that can be passed down through the family, all that sort of thing. If that's how you want to open things up, because if you can't finance something, you can't buy it. End of story. And it's all about that. Innovation.
This is always going to be brought on, isn't it? So when in times that we're going through, and I think the question was saying, you know, what can keep us away from recession? I think that horse has bolted. I think we're there. It's actually what can now inspire us over the next 10 years and where can we progress? It's innovation from specialist lenders, the market, landlords bringing things. Because if landlords en masse leave the market, it doesn't mean that then there's loads of properties that first-time buyers can automatically buy.
No. The danger with the government intervening and trying to stop a property recession is that they're going to, you know, increase the prices even more, which is what we don't want. We don't want the balloon to keep on blowing up. We need
that's what
a levelling off.
That's what Osborne did to some degree, didn't he? But he only interfered with one end of the market. And if you understand property, you'll understand that if you block any part of it, it blocks all of it.
Yeah.
You know, if you block the top end or the bottom end, everything in the middle suffers because nobody moves.
Well, we said on the previous answer that, you know, around limited companies and that way of bringing in tax. Well, limited companies and ownership of buy-to-lets in a limited company was an offshoot of what happened because of the taxation. Lots of people own them in their personal names, and clever landlords and tax advisors got their heads around that actually they could actually still get 100% mortgage interest relief within a limited company. And that's where the transition from selling your portfolio from a personal into limited. And that was innovation created not by the government, but actually by the landlords themselves and through tax advisors. Too many levers have been pulled. And how many housing ministers, Stephen, have we had another one since the last time we spoke?
Well, I think we have. I think we're up to about 15, aren't we?
So, you know, their 11-month plan, I think the one we've got today is the same one that we had 11 months ago, but we've had one in between. It's not a 20-year plan, 25-year plan for housing. When they changed buy-to-let and they pulled the lever on taxation and they pulled the lever on affordability and stress tests, sorry to bring that back up, you know, how would you know which ones had the cause and effect?
Okay, well, that's all we've got time for in this half of the show. So join me again after the break when we'll be asking Jamie and Charlotte more of your questions. Hello and welcome back to Property Question Time Part 2. I'm joined by Jamie Pritchard and Charlotte Edwards. Welcome back, guys. Jamie, your second question. I'm a relatively small developer and constantly being frustrated by the time it takes to apply for and receive approval for development loans. Can the experts advise as to how I may expedite this process, as it has in the past cost me the lost opportunities?
I bet it has, you know, and it's all about, I always say for developers, and, you know, speaking for Charlotte now and, you know, my limited experience in that myself.
Shouldn't you either put without prejudice or subject to contract?
No, it's not that. I'm not, there's no asterisks at the bottom of what we're saying now. No, it's all about doing your due diligence and making sure. And when I say about due diligence as a developer, it's making sure that you've got everything in the row. And that includes if you're not as experienced, I know you're the person's asking the question, but I'm answering it for everybody. It is experience, but it's having a good broker. So if you're not experienced of actually picking the lender yourself, or you haven't got the time to go out around the myriad of lenders, especially with a lot of the changes that are happening at the moment, and if they're lending and what they're lending at, it's getting a broker to choose the right lenders for yourself. I see sometimes applications coming in which don't even have a really good, if not at all, a schedule of work. So the costings are not even being done. So making sure that you've got all your ducks in a line and making sure you've got the legal parties, making sure you know the lender is able, willing to lend, has got the ability to get you onto that development, has got actually the capacity to accept your application at the moment, because we know a lot of lenders are under the cosh, actually service-wise at the moment. So the right lender for you 6 months ago may not be the right lender for you for that project now, because as you said, the alternative is that you could lose that project.
When you approach a lender, is it a valid question to say, how long is your approval time?
100%. You should be asking that. And it's not just about how long is your service proposition from start to finish, because it's not a piece of string answer, because it could be how your person who's asked the question probably has got a really good legal team around them, I would imagine. But if they haven't, get the good legal team around you. Don't just use somebody. If you're doing a development loan, don't use the person for legals that you used for your own home that was a free lawyer down the road. We see that happen, don't we?
Yeah.
And they're thinking, well, they don't know. Development and bridging finance is sort of souped up really good lawyers needed because of the speed and because of the consequences of not actually having that, the opportunity cost. So you definitely ask them the service times.
Okay.
And if they don't give you the right answer, ask them again.
You need a specialist lender. It's like what you're saying. You
do.
need a specialist and you need a broker who's got access to a lot of different lenders.
Yeah.
And to have a good relationship as well. So the first thing I do when I view a project is I give my broker a call.
Yep.
What are my options on this?
But you've had good brokers and bad brokers. I'm sure you've had experience before, or people who have that.
I've been very lucky, but yes, I'm sure there are bad brokers out there.
There's bad everything and good everything, but it's really those brokers, because if your experience has only been, for example, buy-to-lets, so lots of brokers know how to apply and know the rules for buy-to-lets. As soon as you go to them as your next stage of the journey, is going, I've now found something I want to develop, whether that be land with planning, or maybe it's a property that I want to convert from commercial to residential, that broker may not be the right broker for that type of deal, because you need to ask questions whether they've got experience of it, so your broker, whether their whole of market is a good question to ask, and whether they've got all the lenders able to help them with it. So those sort of questions should help the person asking that question.
But it's the same, isn't it? It comes back time and time again. Build your team and try and hold on to your team, and use the specialists in the market. I mean, it's the same as taxation. Somebody will say, oh, well, I've heard it so many times. I've been to my accountant, and they say, and what's your accountant's specialism? Is it property? Does he understand all the intricacies of stamp duties, group situations with property, or, and why are you in property? What's your exit strategy? Oh, I never talked about that. Oh.
My accountant can look backwards. Yeah, they can look at what I've done and paid and spent last year. They can't give me tax advice going forwards. My accountant, my tax advisor does that. And it's the same way that your specialist lenders can lend on different types of projects. That's why we're specialists by nature to do it. But I've seen so many times, I'm not sure if you have, where you've got a buy-to-let property that's a bit tired, needs a bit of work, but customers try and shoehorn it into a buy-to-let lender that doesn't allow any sort of development or refurbishment works, and then they get a zero valuation back. The zero valuation doesn't mean it's worth nothing, it just means it's not viable for that lender.
For that lender, yeah.
And actually what you've done then is wasted time. You could lose the property. Imagine if that's an auction deal and you need to complete on it in 28 days. So there's a lot of times picking that right crack team around you, making sure you've got the due diligence. I always say I'll get my pack together, so if I need to send it into a broker and I find the right property when I don't even know I'm looking for one, I've many a time turned up at an auction and suddenly my hand's gone up by mistake, and I'm doing it. I jest, but I will always have that pack with myself where I know I've got all the documents that a lender would need. The drip feeding of documents in and out is what really does slow down deals.
I can remember years ago I had a bank manager, and he always used to say to me, if I say no to you, don't have an argument with me, don't get cross with me, ask yourself why I'm saying no, because it might be the products we offer don't suit you, and I can see that better than you, or alternatively, you haven't got your act together, you haven't given me enough information. So work it out, be very precise, and come back and ask, not getting cross, but just ask why.
But in that example, Charlotte gave a really good answer that she's got a broker. First thing she does when she leaves the development is ring a broker. A broker is not her bank manager. A broker is an intermediary to allow access to all the bank managers.
I think that's a fair point, yeah.
So that's exactly.
I consider him part of my business team.
Yeah.
He tells me
Massively.
whether a deal is viable or not.
Yeah.
Okay, Charlotte, your second question, and having talked to you for a while, I'm not sure you're going to like this too much. But, criticism over the government's proposed reduction in stamp duty suggested that all it did in the event was to benefit buy-to-let purchasers rather than first-time buyers, as they still didn't have the required mortgage deposits. So in other words, the schemes are a little bit futile. If they can't afford the deposits to fund, or the interest rates have shot up so much they can't afford the repayments, it's all a bit pointless, isn't it? Do the panel agree with this criticism? I don't think you do you?
I don't agree. You know, all that happened in that scenario was buyers had suddenly got extra money in their pocket to spend on a property because we got rid of the stamp duty threshold. So what happens? The prices of the properties go up. You're still spending the same amount anyway, but of course you need a bigger deposit, and the buyers needed a bigger deposit. The people who it did benefit was the landlords or the property owners who were selling, because of course they benefited from that price inflation.
So actually it was self-defeating anyway.
I think so, and I think it's part of what's caused this bubble of this price increase that we've experienced over the last 12 months. I think it really has caused that.
And where do you think it's going? Do you think this new government will bring in things to make purchasing rather more easy?
Honestly, I hope they don't, because with the best will in the world, I don't want to see another huge increase in pricing, because although yes, as a developer I might think, great, I can get an extra 20-25%, which is what some of my house prices went up by. It impacts the bottom end of the market, and at that bottom end of the market, those first-time buyers need to be able to step onto that ladder to move the rest of the market.
But as we said in part one, doesn't that come down to these guys offering more flexible mortgage products?
It's, you know,
wouldn't that be more use than the government tinkering around with things?
Probably, yeah. But I think, you know, there's a lot of variables involved in this, and I think everyone's got to work together. So, you know, we need, yes, potentially as a last step, government intervention, but yeah, an improvement of lending without too much risk, because we don't want a repeat of the 2008 crisis with the...
Yeah, I agree, you know, but let me just be the voice for the lenders for 2 moments, Stephen. You know, we can always innovate, as I've said, but, you know, Help to Buy, you know, for the first-time buyers allowed you with a 5% deposit, so 5% skin in the game, your 20% loan. So what do we want lenders to do? Because we're not going to, you know, that was really a 75% product for the lenders, yeah? So minimal risk compared to a 95%. So if the lenders come out with a 95% product now, but we're saying that house prices could go down by 10%, is that the right product to bring out on those? And is that development worth what it is on the new build?
But Jamie, I've got two propositions for you here.
Okay.
Listen, where hundreds of years ago when I was young, a 95% mortgage was just absolutely the norm. And we never had any trouble. We never had huge amounts of repossessions or anything. It was only till these Americans started packaging up mortgage portfolios and flogging them and trying to inflate them with anybody who'd sign a bit of paper and say, I'll borrow some money, to pad the portfolios out and get extra revenue for them. That's when the trouble started, and that's what caused 2008. It was nothing we did here. We were fine, actually. And you saw with the Northern Rock crisis, actually, there's nothing wrong with Northern Rock. They've got quite a lot of good stuff on their books, but the government sort of took them over, didn't they? And
well, that was the run on the bank, wasn't
it?
So that all comes down to the cost of funds. So everything you're talking about, what funded a lot of the markets and the specialist lenders, was those securitization market. And remember, securitization markets still exist now. They're just being packaged in a different way in the warehouses. So,
but the other thing I'd suggest is this, that would make life a lot easier for lots of people. If you moved the stamp duty obligation to the seller rather than the buyer, it then becomes fundable because it's included in the purchase price, and therefore you guys would lend on it. Somebody's, you know, because when a first-time buyer, I mean, we're very keen here to promote young people getting on the housing ladder, but what they've got to do, they've got to find a ridiculously high deposit that they struggle to save with because they're paying so much in rent, okay? But not only that, then they've got lawyers' fees, they've got surveyors' fees, they've then got stamp duty on top. And it's all right saying, well, you know, okay, there are stamp duty reductions for for various categories, but that doesn't work across the board, and it's a bit disproportionate depending on what part of the country you're in, isn't it?
I like the idea, but Charlotte said earlier that, it affects the bottom of the chain. So if the stamp duty is being paid by the seller, it then affects the top of the chain. So we're going to have a lot of properties where people are maybe retiring that are just maybe should downsize, but now thinking, I don't really want to take that
What's
cost.
wrong with that? I guarantee that those people...
There's nothing wrong with it. I'm just saying what will happen.
Oh, hold on. Those people that are downsizing, you can bet your bottom dollar they make quite a lot of money on their property.
Potentially.
So, if they have to pay the stamp duty. Now, where there could be some kind of mitigation, if you like, you could say that if you have paid stamp duty going in, when this change comes about, you're allowed to mitigate what you've paid against what you've got to pay. I mean, I could see that might be necessary.
I can see a HMRC calculator, trying to work that out now, can't we?
Well, well, I tell you what, if you get on the wrong side, they can calculate a lot more complex things than that if you want them to.
But you're right, there needs to be innovation. There needs to be stuff that helps the
something's got
buyer,
to give,
the next time
hasn't it?
buyers. It's not the landlords that were just benefiting from the stamp duty, but I don't think it totally benefited the first-time buyers, basically.
Okay. Well, on that happy note, we're going to end the programme. So I'm going to say a big thank you to Charlotte Edwards. Thank you very much for coming in today.
Thank you for having me.
Good. Well, it's been a pleasure. And Jamie Pritchard, thank you again for coming in.
Thank you.
Great answers as ever. Controversial as ever.
That's what you hired me for.
Listen, I'm Stephen Galpin. Join me again next time on Property Question Time. Look forward to seeing you then.